Submit this person. Okay, so let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hamza Reed, and I am the Director of Operations at the Multicultural Center. And I'd like to welcome all of you guys back to our Family First Center weekly Wednesday webinar. Alhamdulillah, now presented in cooperation with ISGH, Anissa Hope Center, and Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. This webinar is presented every Wednesday at 11 a.m., whereas the format usually consists of a short presentation followed by a question and answer session at the end, where we will field different questions from the audience in the chat box below. Today's topic is back to school mental health prep. So I know this is going to be an important topic, and this will be presented by Yalda Ahmadi. For some of you guys who do not know Sister Yalda, she has earned her BA in psychology from Baylor University. She also received her master's in education in counseling from U of H. She is currently the program director at Olive Branch Muslim Family Services, whose mission is to strengthen, support, and empower individuals and families through counseling, education, and social services. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Sister Yalda.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Yalda Ahmadi. I am program director, as Brother Hamza mentioned, at Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. And I know the topic of back to school is coming up, especially with the timeline of back to school moved up within so many districts and private schools and universities to make up for some of that lost time due to COVID, really that quality of face-to-face education and interaction. And so with going back to school, I know that there's a lot of parental concerns, sibling concerns about how, our kids and youth are going to transition full time. A lot of our school districts around the Greater Houston area have decided to do full FaceTime, full in-person time, I guess real FaceTime that is. And so there's a huge adjustment that needs to be made. So I have a small presentation here about the mental health kind of prep and check that we can do. And I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started. So, okay. All right, so let's get to some of our reintegration concerns, such as boundaries, anxiety, and bullying as we break back into school. So boundaries are a huge thing right now. Personal, family boundaries, as the threat levels of the COVID, concern within our community is changing. It's for the first time in a while, concerns are increasing. So whether your family is, personally vaccinated, if everyone eligible in your home is vaccinated or not, kind of depending on your own personal concerns or worries, it's important to establish boundaries and what you're willing to do and who you're willing to be around and how you're willing to be around them. So again, a lot of families and just personal opinions have resulted in people going back into selecting their pods, who they're willing to hang out with, who they're willing to spend social time with. I know we've seen across the news people going to music festivals and this new Delta variant kind of lingering around. That's sometimes a concern, right? So, a lot of people are going back into social distancing, even though they are taking precautions when they are out in public, such as masking and being vaccinated, making sure that their hands are clean and all that good stuff. But each family unit and family is different. There also will be generational differences within the family as well. So you may see younger people taking more precaution, or they'll be taking less precaution depending on their interpretation of what the risk is for themselves and for their family members. So it's really important just to communicate your family expectations with your inner family unit as well as the larger family unit. Again, things are starting to open up, but we are seeing numbers increasing as well. So it's important to be direct and be understanding. So let's say your family, your unit of 3 to 4 people does something a certain way, and extended family maybe kind of exhibiting different behaviors when it comes to group and social contact. So maybe you don't feel comfortable with going back to that back to school bash with family and friends, or back to school party or birthday party. It's important to say why, for your own confidence, and be understanding when people do tell you their whys, if they're not willing to do something, or if they still have they want to come, but they're going to come masked. It's important to allow them that personal choice, without judgment. Because again, people are assessing their own risks. And if you need to, you take a step away. That's your personal boundary. That is the family boundary. As heads of household can make this kind of their rule in the household. If you have younger kids in the house, and I say kids, but adolescents, anyone that has kind of their own social schedule. And then you also have older generations in your home that may be more susceptible to the adverse effects of COVID, or the really bad, end up in the hospital sort of um, symptoms that they may come down with, if they do come down with it. So it's important to communicate, hey, why we're doing certain things, and who we're doing it for. It's not coming down just as like a ruling down on the house. And also flexibility with new information, right? And planning. So I think when everyone first got their vaccines, we could wear masks, we could, stop wearing our masks inside with others that are vaccinated, and really enjoy that time. But now we're hearing again, that not everyone that says they're vaccinated is actually vaccinated, and so that's becoming a risk in public settings, or just settings that you don't know people's vaccination I guess status, but also understanding some of the vaccines limitations, right? So even if you're vaccinated, we now know you can of course carry it. It's just the symptoms for yourself are less likely to affect you, but again, you may pass it along to someone that can actually come down with a harsher case. So again, establishing those boundaries, communicating why is incredibly important, especially as we, again, are going towards reopening. And so what does that often result in is anxiety around sometimes establishing these boundaries and having those difficult conversations. And so it's important to know what anxiety looks like, because we might not always use those words to explain how we're feeling. And that is no different. I mean, the lack of communication when it comes to anxiety is no different across the different age groups. So within young children, they might not be telling you they have anxiety, but they definitely feel it. And that can come up in stomach aches, crying spells, diet. So they may be restricted on their diet, not eating or excessively eating. Restroom breaks. Are they withholding going to the restroom? Are they going to the restroom every 5 minutes? So with young children, again, their anxiety may come out in the form of nightmares and bedwetting. And then you get to teens. Again, they have the words, they have the vocabulary, but they might not always voice their concerns or what may be leading to the anxiety, for fear of judgment, not wanting to be assessed. Of course, they're going to come with their own kind of teenage insecurities, right? So you may see headaches, fatigue, irritability, concentration issues, grades, and like maybe school refusal, like not wanting to just go to school at all. Um, Sleep problems, as well as like substance use. I think it's very important within our community to acknowledge that with teens and young adolescents, regardless of their education setting, so whether it's a private school, Islamic school, charter school, public school, um, at that age, if they, if they can get their hands on it, it may come across them. So it's very important to, acknowledge that if you do come across something such as a substance that they shouldn't have in their possession, is to acknowledge, all right, what's going on here? I know we want to give our children the benefit of the doubt. Oh, it's a friend or something like that. But again, just understanding like where this may be coming from, where the behavior may be stemming from, and how the teenager, adolescent is trying to cope with their feelings by leaning into any sort of substance. And then adults ourselves, right? So again, adults may not use the word anxiety or anxious. If you see yourself or someone you know, significant other, nervous, have this feeling of impending doom, worry that they cannot control, sweats, rapid heartbeat, fatigue, trembling, and avoiding some of those triggers. So when it comes to social settings, they may avoid being exposed to their triggers. A lot of times with adults, when they do have those feelings of anxiety, sometimes they want to lean into it being a physical response. Could it be a heart attack? Could it be something more serious? And oftentimes it's just a anxiety attack that is more of an emotional response rather than a physiological health response. And then there's the elderly within your household, right? So, or someone you may know living on their own. Elderly, you find them avoiding the avoidance of social settings, right? So we're just coming through a pandemic where elderly were not to gather, were not to be gathered around because of their susceptibility to COVID-19 and really bad symptoms. So they may be avoiding activity. I mean, they've gone for so long with avoiding social settings. So if they're avoiding their, maybe it's a evening stroll. If you find them avoiding that or making excuses to why they're not doing that, or they become incredibly conscious about checking for safety. Is the seatbelt working? Is everything in place? Is the car okay? Or is there someone at the door that may not be there? Or there's just like an increased kind of alertness that may be resulting from no actual threats. Panicky, shaking, and of course fatigue. And any of the physical responses or symptoms and signs that I've mentioned, it's always important to just check with the medical doctor to make sure that there's not a medical reason for this other than possibly the anxiety. And all right, so again, going back to the school setting and anxiety, let me make sure. Okay, yeah, sorry. I'm sure our drop-off warriors, as children are going back into daycare, understand, a clingy child. When children are worried about being separated from their caregivers, that's, a huge sign of separation anxiety. And again, there's always that grace period that you give children, whether it's drop off at daycare or drop off at school, going back into a new school year. But looking at the persistence of it and the time that it lasts. So if it's the first few weeks, maybe the first month, okay, that makes sense. They're adapting to this new environment, new friends, new teachers, new adults telling them what to do. But if you find this over a course of a few months, and the separation anxiety from the child, whether it's like screaming, crying, clinginess, is not getting better, it's a good sign, indicator to have the child assessed for any other concerns. Again, it just may be something a little bit more serious than just a morning bout of grouchiness or not wanting to leave mom and dad to go to work. Again, just going back to social anxiety, when children are excessively self-conscious, difficulty in class participation and socialization. So if the teacher is coming back to you and saying, hey, your child is doing great in school, but they don't really raise their hand often, or when they're called upon, they're a little bit more quiet, or, they're just having difficulty making friends. I know with the transition of, again, just COVID kind of taking over our school years and changing that, this may be the first time in 1 to 2 years that your child is maybe going to a new school, right? So let's say they were in, you know, 6th, 7th grade during the beginning of the pandemic, and now they may be going into high school or another junior high. So there's a lot of social anxiety. I mean, you kind of just took them out of this fishbowl and you're putting them in a new fishbowl, a new environment, and there's a lot of adjustment there. And just, you know, acknowledging with the child that, hey, this is going to be a growing pain. I'm here to support you. And, you know, just giving them that support that they need. And again, just generalized anxiety can come up. Children with generalized anxiety often worry about, particularly about school and performance. They may struggle with performance. So I know I said earlier, you know, seeing like low grades, but excessive perfectionism is another indicator. Feeling that they cannot make mistakes is kind of this like self-policing that children may do because they feel like that's the only thing that they can control. And anxiety has shown us that a lot of people really claw into what their controllables or what they feel like they can control. And just additional anxiety related disorders can be selective mutism. I know I mentioned earlier, you know, a teacher giving you feedback, such as, you know, the child not participating in school activities or when called upon. But, you know, if this is resulting in something, again, that's over a course of several months, they're not breaking out of their shell. You know, again, this may be a time to refer them to another counselor, a therapist outside of the school setting to address maybe some deeper concerns there. Obsessive compulsive disorder, again, I don't have the prevalence ratings on these or numbers on this, but you may find children alleviating their anxiety by performing compulsive rituals like counting excessively, washing their hands excessively, and just having these sort of compulsions where they don't feel free from that anxiety until that task is completed or they complete that task multiple times. Also specific phobias. When children have you know, an excessive or irrational fear of a particular thing. You know, Houston is no stranger to natural disasters. So if your child is, you know, experiencing anxiety related to oncoming storms, you know, it gets cloudy, they get nervous, or you're driving in a car, it starts raining, it gets nervous, especially if that child has had some sort of experience in the past. Let's say, you know, your car was stranded in flooded water, they were in the back seat with their car seat or in, you know, buckled in, and you were in a tough situation with them. Of course, that can be a stressful trigger for them. Or if your home was flooded in the last, you know, few storms that our city has unfortunately have had to endure. And again, going back to COVID, so germs, excessive germs, or having this phobia of getting sick themselves or someone they know and love getting sick. Again, it can we can see this in different ways, you know, not wanting to go into doctor's visits, you know, finding something unknown, fear of hospitals, you know, if they had a family member go into the hospital and not come out. That can be definitely very concerning, especially as we're coming again out of a pandemic. And again, providing them that support when you see those phobias, when you see that, you know, possibly this disordered behavior, is providing them that support outside of your household with a professional is incredibly important. And finally, bullying. So I know I mentioned my first kind of slide deck was about boundaries. And so some of the boundaries that we place on ourselves and around our families, again, associated with COVID, may make us a target for bullying. And it's really important that, you know, we kind of justify what we're doing, why we're doing it, with confidence and, you know, maybe, you know, explaining that to your children as to why we're doing the things that we are doing and why. Again, just so they have more confidence to kind of talk about this sort of stuff, making them less likely of a target for bullying. Social anxiety is known to make children an easy target for bullying. So it's really terrible because they're an easy target and it worsens their symptoms. So, you know, if you have children that have few friends or spend a lot of time alone, they may lack assertiveness, appear vulnerable and have low self-esteem. All this stuff kind of makes them an easy target. And so it's important to develop these skills. So if your child already has like poor social skills or problem developing friendships, providing that support. And what does that support look like? It differs. And you should be eclectic in your approach. So if you have friends, if you find your child having difficulty making friends at school, but they're fine making friends at the masjid, or they're fine making friends with your family friends, supporting that behavior. And all right, you can do this here, you can do this at home, you can do this with your cousins, you can take these really likable, really social aspects and put them in school, like, and making sure, you set up play dates with other parents if that's something you feel comfortable with, so that they can develop and support their friendships and then carry that on back to the school setting, and just to build their confidence. And then just my final thoughts, mental health checkups are just as important as physical health. Addressing these concerns early is very important, and making sure that you're making a note of it as children are going back into school. So, being there at the open house, meeting with the teachers so that they know who you are, whose parent, who's, that the parents are present in the child's life, so that they feel more comfortable talking to you about any concerns as well. Connecting with school counselors to do any sort of check-in. So if you've had a loss in the family, or if your child has experienced a loss, notifying the school counselors, hey, can you check on my child? Last year around this time, we lost a family member. And they're able to support that child, whether it's just doing side work or just doing mental health checks in school setting. Also, connecting with support teachers. So there's a lot of stuff that teachers may have missed when it came to distance learning. So whether it was something related to reading, whether it was something to, any concerns, again, that distance learning may not have been the best setting for your child, that they could have missed out. Now going back in school, going in person, again, just meeting up with reading specialists if that's what your child needs. Taking advantage of the in-person setting and how teachers can pass on your child from, a homeroom teacher to reading specialist, rather than making those appointments like we were used to with distance education. And making sure that you take advantage, again, of all the resources at your child's school, from, again, support teachers and counselors. It's not all on you as the parent. Also, going back into the flow of back to school checkups with a pediatrician or a child psychiatrist. Know that regular doctor's visits were down during the time of the pandemic. So just making sure that you go in and have that regular checkup. You see your child every day, you may miss something that they won't miss. And then again, just if your child has met with a counselor in the past, going back to school is a really great time for them to check in with a counselor or a therapist to address any concerns or worries that they may not feel comfortable speaking to you about, but they may feel comfortable or build that relationship back with the counselor that they have visited with in the past, or maybe a new counselor. Again, just kind of doing this like, all right, what are school concerns? We're going back to in person. It's been a while. And really just, again, doing that sort of mental health check-in. And I know I talked a lot about confidence earlier. And again, I want to reiterate that with building your child's confidence without being materialistic. Back to school time is an excellent time for a lot of families to buy new things and get ready for the school year. But making sure that the child's confidence isn't invested in having the newest shoes or having the coolest, latest drop in clothing, or, Houston is a huge sneaker town. But, making sure that their confidence comes from something else other than materialism. And, even if you don't have access to, if you're not able to provide new clothes for your children or, again, the latest drop or, most expensive stuff, preparing them to go into the school with confidence. So maybe it's just making sure that their clothing is ironed and clean, and it may not be new, but it's new to them, and building their confidence. Sorry, there's a little echo there, but building their, again, just building their confidence without it being invested in materialism. Again, you don't want your child to be the bully either, if that's where they feel like confidence comes from. You know, they see someone that doesn't have what they have. And again, we don't want to make our children's bullies either for what they do have. And teaching them that confidence does come from within. And that is my final thought.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Yelda. You touched on a lot of very interesting points, especially the point, and I just wanted to get your opinion on it. So do you recommend that parents, regardless if their children is going through anxiety or any other mental health malady that they're going through, regardless if they're doing that or not, do you recommend that the parent contact or just get to know their school counselor?
Yes, definitely. So whether there have been concerns in the past or not, getting to know who their grade level school counselor is a really great way just to send the message that you are involved, and that if something does come up, whether it's big or small, that they, the counselor, the teacher, it feels comfortable reaching out to you.
Okay, so now we will begin our question and answer session of the webinar. I will start off. I have a question, and this is again you touched on so many other points, and I'm sure you've talked about this, but I just wanted to get a little bit more from you. Soon, as we were talking about, most kids and college students will be going back to full-time in-person classes after being restricted to virtual learning since the last year due to COVID. How would you advise the student themselves who may be feeling anxiety to even go to school?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is college students, right? You're going a year and a half of distance learning, and you may be possibly stepping foot on a college campus for the first time. That is anxiety inducing just to think about. But what's wonderful, it's you and everyone else is in the same boat, grounding yourself in that. This is not normal. This is not normal for anyone around you. And also just finding your peer supports as well as professional support. So finding people that, may have similar concerns or similar interests, and then you can invest your time in that. But if it's something to where you cannot physically get out of the car, you are physically, bound by your anxiety from going into the classroom, when that is the only option, that is a time to reach out to a mental health professional to address some of these concerns and what are your kind of mental barriers that's getting in the way of you doing that. It's really easy to say, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, and kind of justify your excessive concerns. But as we know, we've got to kind of move forward, and there's often something underlying there that's really stopping you. So take the precautions that you need to, but also don't defend your own logic. Reach out to a mental health professional and let them kind of show you a different side of yourself by holding up that mirror, what's going on, challenging you on some of those thoughts and beliefs.
Very good. And finally, how should a parent better prepare their child to handle the rigors and stresses of school life? How young should they begin to teach?
Yes, I think I talked about it with the daycare warriors, right? So dropping off children, and having, again, just that, even at that young age, um, reassuring them that they're safe, reassuring them that you'll be back to pick them up, starting with those small steps, and also getting into the routine of things, right? So Kids are creatures of routine. So as you're going back into the school setting, so look, it's summer, it's daylight until about 9 o'clock here. It doesn't get dark. So eating dinner at an appropriate time, eating breakfast at an appropriate time, adjusting them to that schedule of what school will be like before school starts. I know we only have a few weeks or a few days, depending on the district and school, but getting them back accustomed to routine so that when you do add the element of in-person school, that it's not a complete shock. They're still eating breakfast at the same time that they were used to. They're still eating dinner at the same time that they were used to. It's just school lunch may be a little bit different, but you're there to pick them up.
Very good. I'd like to sincerely thank Sister Yelda for an important, impactful presentation. And thank you all for tuning in to our Family First Center's weekly Wednesday webinar. Be sure to meet us here each week where we'll be discussing a different topic every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.